Hello. Well, obviously, you know what this is about. So, obviously, if you just open up Unity first, and then, you can create an account if you want, but you don't really need one. I don't know whether it'll let you progress without one, but it doesn't hurt to have one because it keeps all your settings, like on whichever computer you're using. So, if you create a new project and save it to your C drive or a drive you can easily access, because when it comes to using Git, it'll be easier to use it from, let's say, drive C or drive D or whatever drive you're using compared to drive C, program files, so on, so on, so on, because you spend a lot of time writing command line. So it's a lot easier just to put C, whatever folder you're using, compared to C in the full directory and then the folder you're using. So if we make it a 2D project, and I'm going to call mine the Welsh game, it's probably easier, and then create project. Okay, so in short, this square that you see, or rectangle, is the camera view that you'll have. And well, first off, if you go to Window, Layouts, and change it to wide, this is the well, this is what I prefer, at least, because the inspector here is everything you'll want to see when you're messing about with code and seeing what your code actually does. This will be, eventually, will be all your files and folders and everything, and that's just like a hierarchical view of it. And here's the hierarchy, which is the actual things that are in the scene currently, so whatever you're working with. So I've got notes of what I'm doing. So okay, so in your assets folder, if you just right click and create a new folder and call that prefabs, and then create another one and call that scenes, and then create a third one, which is, that'll be called scripts. Again, this is obviously just going to be for tidiness and things like that. And then in the hierarchy here, if we create a new canvas, so UI and then canvas, and that'll add a few things to your screen. And then yeah, and then in here as well, we'll create a new create an empty, and we'll call this our game manager. So as I was saying, on the right hand side here, you'll see that you've got the name of the thing that you've got selected, as well as the transform. The transform is basically the position, the scale, and the rotation. So global positions and things like that. And then as you toggle through all these different objects within your hierarchy, you'll see that the settings on the right hand side change according, because each one's going to be different, obviously. So we've done that, and we've done that. Okay, now if we go into the scripts folder, right click again, and we go to create C# script, and that'll create a thingy, and then we actually need to type straight away to rename it, otherwise it screws a load of stuff up. So if we call it a game manager script and capitalize like the first letter of every word, and that's that. And then on our game manager, we'll just drag the file into the right here. The other way you could do that is if you go to add component and type game manager script, you'll see that now it's popping up here in the search bit, and then we can just add it that way. Now if we file, save scene as, and then save it within our scenes folder, and we'll call this the game scene. Save. Done that. Okay. Now the game that I want to create, this is a bit of blabbing on a little, but the game basically, I've been thinking about it for a while, and there's nothing like it currently. There's a lot of complicated Welsh words like Llangranog and Crifrifiadron and things like that, things that you just wouldn't believe is a real word in Welsh, of course. And what I want to do is make a simple game which will bring up a word, well, two words, one in Welsh and one will be gibberish, and it's down to the person to decide which one's Welsh, basically. So I'm thinking if this was on a mobile and it was like a portrait view. So if we go into the game settings, you'll see the two tabs here. You've got scene and you've got game, and then change free aspect to 16 by 9, and then we also want to make it portrait, and that will give you basically a pretty decent view of the portrait of a phone, if you know what I mean. And then if you come back into scene here and then go into canvas again down the bottom left in the hierarchy now, and then on the right hand side you'll see that we've got the different settings. So you've got the canvas itself, and we're going to go into that and change the screen space to camera, I think. Nope, wrong one. Change it back to overlay. It's the canvas scaler. Change the constant pixel size to scale with screen size, and basically we'll take the X and we'll make that 1080, and we'll take the Y and make that 1920, which will be basically a good resolution of a monitor, except it'll be portrait rather than landscape. And then we'll change the width and the height to 0.5. Now basically what this has done, you'll see that in your actual scene view here, that it's rotated the, well, first off it's made the scale away from 800 by 600, which is like Windows XP style monitors, and now it's made it widescreen, and it's made it portrait, like, you know, like we just discussed. So then if we just save that, and then if you go back into game, basically they sync up. Whatever you see in the scene is whatever you'll see within the game. Done that, done that. Okay, now if we go into the canvas in the hierarchy and we right click, and in UI we'll create a button, and now you'll see that the button has appeared within the game scene. If we go back to the scene, you won't see it, which is kind of screwed up. But if you double click on canvas, it'll take you to the canvas view as opposed to the actual game view, and now you can see that we've got this minuscule button right in the center. And then if we go back to game, you know, it makes sense, you know, what you see is what you get, sort of thing. So in the scene view, if you select the button and we just make it pretty hefty, and you see that you've got an arrow within the hierarchy next to button, we'll go into the text view of the button, and we can just call this, let's say, word 1. Well, not call it word 1, but within the text component of the game object, we'll make that word 1, and we'll change the font size to I don't know, 50 maybe. Yeah, that's cool. Make the button wider. I mean, there's a lot of settings in regards to the user interface of everything. Shit. Basically, undo that. You want to, the text field is its own field. You can make this as narrow and as wide as you want, but you want that to be the width of the button. So then if you go back to the button here and you make this wide, you'll see that the child of the button, which is the text field, will expand to the button. So we can make that pretty wide, and go back to the game scene and you'll see that it reflects it. And if you press play, you'll see that it acts like a regular button. You know, you can click it and you can see, you know, the kind of click effects and things like that. So if we stop that for a start off and go back to scene, and then we will take the button and duplicate that, and then we'll have two buttons, obviously. Up in the top left hand corner, you've got your different like clickable options, and we'll change it to this one here, which allows you to move your objects around. We drag that down, so then you've got your second word, and the name of this now has added a 1 to it. I'm not a big fan of that. So what we can do is if we rename that to word 2, and we rename the first one to word 1, and then within word 2 text we will change that to word 2. And then again, just checking in game, you know, it's pretty straightforward. Let's save that again. And then the last thing I want to do, which is before we get onto the programming side of things, is if we go back into Canvas and add a text field, we can drag that up. Same again. Now you'll see that similar to how the buttons have a text field, this text field has the same components, exactly the same, except now it's not a child of a button. So in here we can make this text, let's say, I don't know, 50 again maybe, and just because we're cool we'll make it white, and you'll see that the text isn't showing, and that's because we need to click this button here, and we need to make the text box bigger so it can go in there, and then you can write pretty much anything you want then. So hello, this is the text box, and you can center it and, you know, just jazz it up a little, bold, and from there then you could do anything like select which word is in Welsh. Piece of cake. And then this, we'll just call this text prompt. So I'm just renaming the hierarchy again. Well, renaming the game object, sorry, that's in the hierarchy, and here we go. So obviously we're not here to do like a lesson in user interface design. It's purely let's get a script sorted, you know. So if you go into Game Manager, and you'll see that your script is still there from earlier, and you double click that, and it'll open Visual Studio. Now, I don't know what you know, so I'll probably treat you like an idiot at times, so just ignore that. These are your namespaces, and that basically decides what libraries you're going to be using. Now, in regular C# programming, let's say you weren't using Unity, you wouldn't have your Unity engine namespace. I don't see C# scripts without that, to be honest, because I only code C# in Unity. But as you can see, when I copy and paste it and remove it, it changes the highlighting of mono behavior, and that's because mono behavior won't work without it. And then if mono behavior doesn't work without it, neither will the start function or the update function, because they all piggyback off the Unity engine script, which is, you know, written by the Unity developers and so on. So you kind of need that in when you're working with Unity, but realistically, you wouldn't need it if you're programming something for your work and stuff, you know. These namespaces are grayed out simply because we have no code that uses them. So you can delete that and nothing changes, you know, because you're not using any code that affects them, so who cares, in short. So I mean, but you leave them in because the chances are when you start doing maths and things like that, that's the type of thing that will use system collections and system in general. System using times and dates and things like that needs access to the system, and to do that you have to have the namespace for the system. So every time you create a script within Unity, it's going to use it's going to have two functions by default. One is going to be void start, and the other is going to be void update. Void start is pretty much self-explanatory. Whenever you click play, it's going to run the script. Done. It's run it already, but because you've got nothing within the function, it's not going to do anything. So just for kicks, if you were to put in something like print this is a test again, and save that. Now, just for clarification, the only scripts that will run are scripts that are either being called by scripts that are in the scene, or scripts that are directly within the scene. So we've got this game manager that does nothing apart from hold this game manager script. You could, in theory, you could remove this transform and it would still work fine, simply because it's only there as a script holder. The game manager has no other purpose other than holding this script. So for instance, if I just untick this real quick and then click play, nothing happens. But then if I tick that again, and this tick, by the way, determines whether it's enabled or disabled. So if I click play again, you'll see now that in the console at the bottom left, this is a test, and it will only run once because, as I say, the first frame of every game will run with start. And there's a million ways of doing that, but pointless talking about that at the moment. But that is the premise of the start function. Now update, that runs every frame. So if your game is run at 60 frames per second, every second you'll have 60 posts of update. If you put, again, print this is an update, you'll see now that when we run the script, it'll say this is a test, and then it'll be followed by a shitload of updates, basically. So if I close that, and now, so we've got this is a test, and there we go. This is an update. We're at 300. You know, it'll just go into stupid numbers. So that is how start and update works. Now, again, right now we don't really need to do anything with those, but just to get things started, what we'll do is, if we declare two buttons, first off, now, coming back to the whole namespace thing earlier, buttons use... No, mate. That's Rocco, by the way. Buttons use the Unity Engine UI namespace. So you need to add that to the top first. And again, because we have no UI script, nothing's going to happen. And then we'll create a public button, and we'll call this word1. In fact, word1 button. With a lowercase u. And then public button word2 button. And now again, you can see that the UI namespace has kind of bumped up into white. That means it's being used. And now, again, that's done nothing. It's just declared two buttons. Neither buttons are actually know what they are. You know, they're non-existent, and nothing will happen with them. So now you've got word1 and word2 button appear in the transform because we've made it public. Public means it can be viewed from anywhere. Now, if we were to delete the public here, this means they're just, I don't even know what the term is, I'd need to ask, but these are just kind of like neutral, I guess. They don't really do anything. You can access them if you know how, but they're not going to be like visible here in the inspector or visible in alternate scripts. Now, if you're to make it private, this exactly the same as if it's neutral, except now you can't easily access it from other scripts. You'd need to use functions and things like that. But we actually need them public currently, so change that back to public. Now, public button 1, public button 2. Now, what we can also do is, if we, on start, I want to change word1 button, the text within word1 button, I want to change that to, let's say, I don't know, we'll pick a Welsh word when we get to it. So first off, we want to use word1 button dot get component. So as I was explaining earlier, every game object has components within itself. So word1 has the rect transform component, it has a canvas renderer component, image script, button script, so on, so on, so on. Now, what we could do is, oh sorry, I'm already mistaken. Let's say we were to put button, we could make this disabled, set active. Oh. Ah, my mistake. So set active. There we go. Now this would disable the button entirely, but obviously if we put false in, that would disable the button, but we don't want to do that. I want to access the child of that button. So get child, get component in children, yeah, that'll do. And I want to find the text component, and I want to change the text to Cymru, which is Welsh for Welsh. So it basically, again, coming back to, I don't know whether. So word1 button, which is the button as we know, we're going to get the component within the child, and the component is going to be a text component, and we're going to change the text of the text component to Cymru. So that's our word1 button on the left here in the inspector, in the hierarchy, sorry. And we want to find the child of that, which is text, and we want to find the component of that child, which is text, and the component in the inspector here, and we want to change the text to Cymru. So in theory now, when we start, word1 should change to Cymru. And it didn't, naturally. What did I do wrong? Ah, that's what I've done wrong. Newbie mistake. Okay, so if we go back to Game Manager, these buttons haven't been assigned yet. So it's trying to do that, but nothing's happened. So really simple thing to do is we'll drag word1 from the hierarchy. We'll put that into word1 button, and word2 into the word2 button, and then we click play again, and there we go. It's working now. Hey. So again, if we just do the same thing with word 2 and word 2 button dot get component in children text, and we'll change the text of that to, we'll just call this English just for kicks for now, and save that. And now word 1 and word 2 will change to Cymru in English. And now let's say we had a spreadsheet or something like that of all these words and their meanings and so on, so on, so on. Cymru would obviously load from that and load whichever word I want, and English would load from that and load whichever word I want. And you could mix that up as much as you want and switch the words around, so on, so on, so on. But right now it does nothing. So let's say we want to pick Cymru. We'll need to create a function. So public void, coming back to public, public means it's available to anyone, any files and so on. Void means that it returns nothing. So you'll see what happens. If I call it public clicked button 1, if I save this, we should, well, I don't even need to save it, we're going to get an error simply because it doesn't know whether we're meant to be returning or anything. So we're not returning anything, and I'll probably cover that later on in something. But yeah, so public void click button 1, and again we're going to say print clicked button 1. And if we just copy and paste that and change it to 2 and 2. Now what I want to do is, if we just delete the public part of this, and you'll see why this is happening. Now if we go to word 1, and you'll see that within the button component there's an on-click event, and we can add something to the event if we want. And now what we want to do is, currently it doesn't know what the event is. So if we drag the game manager into the none object field, and then we can go to no functions, and we can find our game manager script which we're working on, you'll see that we've got clicked button 1 but not clicked button 2. And that's coming back to the properties again of whether or not it's visible by different things. So if we change this to public, and we can save all, and then sometimes Unity takes a second to figure itself out. Yeah, now you can see we've got button 1 and button 2. So we'll leave button 1 with button 1, and we'll change, we need to drag the game manager into that, and we'll set that to button 2, and then save that and run it. And now again, nothing's happening, we've got no prints happening apart from when these buttons get clicked. So if we click the first button, clicked button 1 worked, and then we click the English one, click button 2 worked. Simple as that. So that is basically the foundations. Rocco, stop growling. That is basically the foundations for a very simple game. Obviously, you know, you click one button, it'll determine something, and click another one, it'll determine something else. Except right now, nothing's been added to it, and that's our neighbour's dog's barking. Hey, enough. Be good. Rocco. Hi. So yeah, that pretty much covers like the very basics of everything, and it'll kind of get us to a start point of what we need to do next. Obviously I'll talk to you about this anyway, but I think the next step would be to start having, let's say, deciding whether we got it right. I mean, we could basically add 4 Welsh words and 4 fake words, and that'll be taken into consideration arrays and things like that, loading from an array randomly, displaying the array stuff within the buttons, so the actual text of the button will change from something from the array, loading it all randomly, and then checking to see if we actually click the Welsh word or the gibberish word. So obviously if you just do this first, then we'll get on fine, and once we start doing kind of complicated stuff, we'll get Git set up, and I'll teach you how to do that. And then from that we will be able to basically share the game files. So anything I do, if you get stuck with something, I'll be able to download all your files pretty quickly, and just help you out that way. It'd be cool. I've already started speaking to a voice actor as well, who's going to do some Welsh accents and things. So we'll have cool sound effects, and I'll get the graphics done, and everything will be cool. Okay, so best of luck with this, and yeah, any questions, let me know.